Great to have the sun on, especially on a Sunday. Some of you might be planning to do some outdoor activities this afternoon, yes?
Yeah.
Breathe in some of that fresh air that Mike mentioned in his meditation. In Unity, we believe that God is the source of our supply. Have you ever heard that? Yeah. And that we live in a universe that is unlimited in that supply. Unlimited in abundance, unlimited in prosperity. So it's okay, right, to ask God to send the sun out on any given Sunday? What do you think? I mean, isn't God here to fulfill our every need? But let me ask you, what if my need is different than your need? What if my need is for it to rain on the weekends?
I mean, what if it was the same?
For those of you who might know, I served at the Unity by the Shore in Neptune, New Jersey. I was a Jersey Shore girl for about 3 years. And I lived 3 blocks from the beach. I was in a wonderful situation, but you can imagine what the area I lived in was like when it was a sunny Sunday or a sunny Saturday. So there was a part of me that appreciated when it rained on Saturday because it was quiet and I could get my talk written, and when it rained on Sunday because people would actually come to church. Oh my goodness. So who should get their need fulfilled? The people who want it sunny or the people who want it rainy? You know, this morning I want to look at that question with you. If God is my source, does that mean God is here to fulfill my every need? No. But first, let me tell you the fact that Unity is one of the few traditions, really New Thought is one of the few, though it's starting now to ripple into more mainstream religious, but it's still one of the few that will teach prosperity from the pulpit at their centers and at their churches. We have this whole series of ideas, right? And principles and beliefs and techniques that we share with our spiritual communities. For example, as many of you know, I've taught the 4T Prosperity Program here almost every single year for the last 8 years. I've also taught it doing gains. The 4 laws of spiritual laws of prosperity. We did Robin Ryder's program. I can't remember the name of that right off the bat. We did the Keys of the Kingdom. In 2011, we did Mary Morrissey's Prosperity Plus. One program, we're doing that again, starting this week. They revised that program, and then in the fall, I'm going to teach Prosperity Plus 2. So we're going to have 20 weeks of training in these ideas, in these techniques, in these principles, and in these beliefs. And like I mentioned earlier, there's about 28 of you that are joining me this Tuesday. And I am so excited about that. Because when we come together as a group, we not only lift up our consciousness individually, but we do it collectively. So this community is just going to soar with this prosperity rising up of consciousness. But even with incredible programs like this, let me add another fact is that many of us in Unity still struggle around the issue of prosperity. Now, when I say prosperity, I want to clarify right up front, I'm not only talking about money, but I'm talking about money. Because if you don't have money and you don't have finances to meet your needs, you may not feel very prosperous. But prosperity is more than just money. It's what Mike touched on in his meditation, health of body, right? Health of mind, loving, fulfilling relationships, right? Sure. All sorts of things that bring what we call happiness and joy and contentment and peace into your experience, in this human experience, right? But some of us are still struggling in Unity with prosperity. Are some of you struggling right now? No? Guess what? Unity centers sometimes struggle with prosperity. If you've been around here for any length of time, that's true, isn't it? Yes. Sometimes. Even the world headquarters of the Unity movement sometimes has struggled with prosperity. So how can this be? How can Unity folks have issues of prosperity? How is that possible when we know all the principles, we have all the teachings, we have these universal laws? What is going on here? And especially when we profess that God is our source. Well, let me ask you, do you believe that God is our source?
Yes.
Yes. What about Unity centers? Is God their source?
Yes. Yes.
Well, if the answer is yes, and God is our source, then that is obviously not enough. It's not enough to keep us from struggling with prosperity. Because many of us are still struggling, right? Many centers, many individuals within those centers. What I have concluded is that God being our source is not enough. Okay, breathe. God as our source is not enough. Something else is still required for us to know and to understand. The source is there, folks. You can breathe. God is always there. It's omnipresence. We say God is everywhere presence. What do we say in the statement of faith? There's one presence and one power in the universe and in my life. God, the good, omnipotent. But to have access to that, to experience it fully, something else is needed. But we all have prosperity. And I suggest to you that the number one reason why we struggle with prosperity is the belief that God is there to fulfill our every need. That's true. How come there's 5 countries right now in South Asia affected by an earthquake? Just think about it for a minute. That's just the latest appearance of needs not being fulfilled. Have you ever believed that God is there to fulfill our needs? It's okay if you have. I know I have, but it's not true. Because if God was there to fulfill our every need, would we have 5 countries right now with people suffering in it? God is not going to send the sun out to shine upon every weekend simply because you have a need for it. And God's not going to make it rain every weekend simply because I had a need for it. Doesn't work that way. This is not how the universe works, folks. There's a wonderful statement made by Joe Goldsmith. How many people are familiar with Joe Goldsmith? He's a wondrous New Thought teacher, a mystic. He has many books that he wrote. If you have never read a book by Joe Goldsmith, I recommend that you read The Infinite Way. There's study groups throughout this country and the world who read his incredible collection of spiritual books. And Joel said, what God can do, God is already doing. Did you hear that? What God can do, God is already doing. What God can do, God is already doing. Now, I want to remind you, in Unity, do we believe that God is outside of ourselves? No. An anthropomorphic figure in the sky? No. With the beard? No. Either blessing us or cursing us? No. Where's God? Inside, in you and me. And God is always expressing its nature. God never falls asleep and suddenly wakes up and says, wait a minute, I should be doing this and get busy doing that. God is already doing whatever it can do continuously. Just take that in from it. God is always doing everything that God can be doing continuously. And don't you think if God could fulfill a need as soon as it rose up, it would be filled? God, we say God is omnipotent. What does that mean? Omnipotence.
All powerful.
All powerful. We say that every week. Do we believe it?
Yeah.
Okay. So as soon as the need rose up, it would be dealt with because God does not sleep on the job. But guess what? God is already doing what God can do. I'm so confused, BJ. Take a prosperity class. I can only touch on this for a few minutes today. So it's obvious if God's already doing what God can do, God doesn't fill our needs. Doesn't happen. Now, does this mean that God doesn't care about us? Do we live in a benevolent universe? Do we live in a universe that's good, that's loving? What do we teach in unity? What do we believe? No, it doesn't mean that God's not loving. It just means that God has designed the universe to work in a totally different way. Okay, what way? A need, folks, is not an avenue through which God can express itself. Can't happen. Now remember this, I'm going to test you later on this. So I want you, if you don't get anything else from this talk, I want you to get this. A need is not an avenue through which God can express itself. Okay. See that again? A need is not an avenue through which God can express itself. If it was, it would be done. It would just be done. So if a need is not the avenue through which God expresses, you know what the avenue is. The avenue is through consciousness. What do we talk about all the time here? It's through your consciousness and my consciousness. Okay? So I have to first awaken to the awareness of my God self and your God self for anything to get done. Then the door opens. Then all sorts of possibilities happen, right? If we were just going to wait for a God outside of ourselves, whenever anything happened, wouldn't you just be waiting? Wouldn't the people in Nepal just be sitting there waiting if nobody within Nepal took any action? If nobody in the world took any action? Is God going to fix what happened over there? Think about it. The universe demands that I have an awareness of God, of the presence of God. Demands it. That I be in relationship with my higher self, my God self, with what we call the source. Not just when I have a need and I go begging to God to pay attention to me. I have to have this awareness when? All the time. And it isn't a matter of I have a need and God will do something about it. No, what's demanded of me is this experience. This consciousness, this awareness, this awakening all of the time. God is not just some big sugar daddy up in the sky who will take care of my every need. Or if he was, it would have everything I want, right? Everything my little human ego wants. I'm not meant to bring my needs to God. Ooh. I'm meant to bring myself to God. To God awareness. Because I'm not bringing myself out there. I'm bringing my ego into an awareness and awakening and understanding a consciousness of who and what I truly am. And who and what you truly are. So I'm not to bring my... Do you see the difference? Resonating a little bit? I'm not to bring my needs to God, I'm to bring myself. I mean, this is profound, if we can get it. Let me ask you, when I go to God with a need, what am I focused on?
The need.
Thank you. When I bring myself to God, what am I focused on?
Your spiritual.
Throughout history, human beings have primarily been a need-based species. But that's not the way we were created to be. We are spiritual beings made in the image and likeness of the Most High. We're not meant to be need-based, we are meant to be God-based, God-expressed, God-demonstrated. So the focus is not upon the need, the focus is upon God, upon being first and foremost in my life and in my awareness and in my consciousness. You probably hear me pray a lot, the opening prayer when we have these community gatherings that we call services, is that, you put God first by making the choice to be here. And it doesn't mean you have to be in this building. I mean, maybe somebody's sitting on the mountain right now meditating. But where does your attention for God, that God within you, where does it rank in the things that you need to do today? Now, this concept isn't new. The mystics and the masters have been telling us this throughout the ages. And I'm going to give you one of my favorite examples because I don't know a better example than this. Someday you'll have to give me one. But this is an example that comes from Eastern philosophy, and I know a number of you have heard it, but it really makes the point for me about how to put God first. There was a master and his disciple, and they were sitting on a bank next to a river. You know this one, right? And the disciple asked the question, "Master, what do I have to do to know God? What do I have to do? Go to church every week?" Now, instead of answering, the master seized the disciple and pushed him into the river and held his head under the water with irresistible strength. And the master would not let the disciple up. And finally, just as the disciple was ready to expire, his lungs bursting, the master released his hold and allowed the boy to come rising, sputtering to the surface. And when the disciple had recovered, the master asked, "What were you thinking when you were under the water?" The disciple replied, "Thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. My entire being was screaming for air." "Well," the master said, "the moment you want God as much as you wanted that breath of air, you will know God." Wow. How much do you want it? How much are you willing to put it at the front of all the other things you need to do to meet your needs? How can we know God? I'm not going to take your head and push you under the water. It's hard enough to get you here. That would be the end of it. BJ has lost it. I can do that in the East, but in the West, we'll end up in jail. So how can we know God's presence? How do we do this? In the Bible, in the book of Psalms, in Psalm 100, it reads about entering into God's gates with praise and thanksgiving. You see, the ancients had this idea that God was like this walled city, kind of a hard place to get into, but once you were there, you were prospered and you were blessed. And they asked, what's the doorway? What's the gate? How do I get into this walled city, into the presence of God? And the answer was, what did I say? Praise and thanksgiving. Count your many blessings. Count them one by one. It's a really popular unity hymn. You'll find it in your songbook, hymn number 153. Unity teaches us not to put our attention on what we don't have, and need is always about what you don't have, and to put your attention on what? What you have. It was all throughout the meditation, Michael let us in. And isn't this, in essence, putting your attention on God? Because there is no lack in God. God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresence, all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere present, the unlimited source of prosperity and abundance. Every day, you and I have to count our blessings. And by doing this, we move from a consciousness of lack, of need, into a consciousness of plenty, of God. Another way to move into this consciousness, and this really resonates a lot with Unity True students, is to take the mystical path. I believe if you return to Unity's roots, you'll find an incredible mystical foundation. Mystical means to have an experience of the presence of God. And this is what happened to Myrtle Fillmore, folks, the co-founder of Unity. Myrtle had an experience of the presence of God, of her God self, of her higher self, shining forth. And she was healed. Myrtle's husband, the co-founder of Unity, Charles Fillmore, who had been reading about God his whole life but hadn't experienced it yet, said, and I love this, he said, if this is true, if there really is a God, I'm going to headquarters. And what did he do? He started to sit in meditation every day for hours upon hours. He said, I'm going to see if through meditation I can experience the presence of God. And so into that silence he went, and out of it came this Unity movement. Came the fact that we're sitting in this room today. He did experience his higher self. He did enter into that awareness and understanding. Both Myrtle and Charles Fillmore embraced the mystical path to experiencing firsthand the presence, and they told everyone who would listen, you can too. And so did Jesus, the Christ. Charles and Myrtle, years and years ago, made a covenant that I want to read to you today. It was made, and I've read it before, but I don't think we can hear it too many times. It was made on the 7th day of December, 1892, 3 years after the Unity movement began in 1889. Now, no one knew about this covenant until after Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were gone. But I want you to hear and feel the consciousness of the founders of this movement. They write, we, Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have, all we expect to have, to the Spirit of truth. So they're not coming from a place of need, right? They put God first?
Yeah.
We hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have, all we expect to have, to the Spirit of truth. And through it to the Society of Silent Unity. That's what Unity was called then. It being, but they had a little condition. I want you to hear the condition, because you're like, I'm not giving everything to God, then I'll have nothing. Then they write, it being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication. An equivalent, they say, in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, an abundant supply of all things necessary to meet our every need. Now listen to this. Without making, this is so important, without making any of these the object of our existence. In the presence of the conscious mind of Christ Jesus, the 7th day of December, 1892, signed by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. You willing to make a covenant? You willing to make a pledge like this for your life? Listen to what it first said in the covenant. What they would give to God. They would give their time, their money, all that they had and all that they would expect to have. But they knew in return, without any of this being the object of their existence, they would receive 100-fold in return, right? Of the same thing. The blessing of peace of mind, health, body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, an abundant supply of all things necessary. Friends, this is the Unity way of life. This is what we teach. Now, how many of us are living it and experiencing it? Are we still waiting for our needs to be met? With the focus totally on the need. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Earthly needs are not the object of your existence. That's what Charles and Myrtle expressed in their covenant. Their needs were not the object of their existence. What's the object of your existence? Get real about it. It may not be God right now. It may be that house with the swimming pool, or I want that particular car, or what is the object of your existence? My needs will be supplied not because I give attention to them, but because, folks, I give attention to what? Your needs will get met not because you give attention to them, but because you give attention to what?
What you have.
Yes, to what you have and to God. Oh, it's so boring in 2015 to put God first. It's not the end thing. But you know, we're in such a better place than we were when people used to put God first. I mean, people used to go to church on Sunday because they didn't dare not to. Now, we are at least empowered enough to throw all that ridiculousness out about being sinners and going to hell and being fearful about going. You know, fear is only level 1 of the 7 steps of moral development, according to Colbert. People do things out of fear on level 1 of moral development. You guys are, and we as people are so much farther along than that. So we're not going to do things out of fear. It has to be from another motivation, another reason. Oh, I got off there. Okay. So the answer is to place my attention on God. So in summary, don't start playing yet. I'm going to do it. So in summary, then
I'm enjoying this talk.
Then I'm going to do so in conclusion. So the summary is God is our source, but God's job is not to fulfill our every need. It's not God's job to make the sun shine or the skies rain on the weekend. This is not the way the universe works. This is not the way to the fulfillment of needs, to abundance, to prosperity. The way to prosperity is to enter into a state of consciousness, an awareness, awakening of your higher self, of God, that is everywhere present. Enter the gate through with praise and thanksgiving. Enter the gate through the mystical path. Seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all other things shall be added unto you. And with that, your life and my life will be prosperous. Our every need will be fulfilled. So in conclusion, I want to ask you a question. Remember I told you I was going to give you a test?
Yeah.
First, is a need an avenue through which God can express itself?
No.
Good. It's not an avenue through which God can express itself. What is the avenue through which God can express itself?
Consciousness.
Yes. Your consciousness of the presence of God. And then every need can be fulfilled from that, right? And with that consciousness and in that relationship with your higher self lies the fulfillment of your every need and the need of everyone else. If we really were coming from that place, would there be any needs that would go unfulfilled?
No.
We would have a life of prosperity and abundance. So with that good news, and it is good news, let us stand and join together in singing now. It's a new season. It's a new day.